The Grand Ascension required a chosen of each of their number to be sent forth, or their own essence in mortal form, vulnerable and stripped of immortality. This entity would move through the realms and enter the Temple of Ascension, which in this prime lay within a hidden place within the boundaries of Lassashar. While there, they would need to open a communion with the hosts above, and place themselves forth to become candidates for elevation to the hosts. They each travelled to the place of ascension, and entered as they were bid. Only 2 others were present, and they worked with them to traverse the terrain and gain entrance to this place of testing, within the borders of the land known as Lassashar. Eventually, after many days of arduous travel and testing of their ability and conviction, they gained access to the Temple of Ascension, and once inside, rested briefly, gathering their composure. One of the others who travelled with them offered to go first, and he stepped into the large inscription-covered circle that lay within the main chamber there. As he did, the symbols began to glow faintly, and the power within this place elevated rapidly, until they all felt the pressure of the divine pushing down upon their essences and souls. This had to be the place, and they were not wrong. A shaft of light came down from the glowing opening in the chamber, and many figures could be seen within it. The one who had stepped into the light first closed his eyes, and another beam shone from the larger beam, passing through him entirely. The chamber was filled with many motes of light that moved from within them, and circled the area, stopping at each of the forms in the light before returning to their origin. The light grew dim, but shone like the moon, and a voice was heard by all in a language they did not know, but strangely understood. "Welcome, child. You will be of the new host." And with that, he vanished in the blink of an eye, and the next stepped forth. The same happened again, beams, motes, and acceptance, and finally, the vanishing. Then they turned to each other and nodded, and they all stepped into the circle as one and waited. The light arrived, but it shone dimmer, and a form took shape between them, and they adjusted to circle it. "You are strange ones, not of this prime. How did you come to be here?" One of their number, the one who had travelled to Lassashar before, spoke for them, and explained briefly what had transpired, how they chose to leave their origins and drive forward to combat this threat to all primes, even at a cost to their own nature. The form seemed taken aback, and was assuredly surprised. "Well, it would seem that you somehow have learned the act of selflessness, and I knew none of your kind capable of such. Interesting indeed." The glowing form paced around them, checking them out intently, nodding and peering into their eyes, until it had seen each of them fully. "I think not. At least not as singular entities." They looked to each other and nodded as one, accepting the opportunity, and the form nodded in response. "You will be known as the Mother of all, and your title is to be held only by your kind who choose to turn their backs on their origins. No non-demonic essence may be granted this status, and you shall work as one mind with one goal, despite your separate essences." And the form looked to them each once more, ensuring all were of understanding. "This means that you are one, split into many smaller, as your origins would have granted you originally when crafted from the source. Count yourselves as lights, as you once were overlords, and count your followers as priests, clerics, or whatever term you choose, as once you created minions that did your bidding from your own power. You will be the first true demonic lights among us, the first demonic host." And with that, they vanished from the prime, losing their identities in an instant, until they reimagined their forms as their new hosts, and then returned to the prime they left in the form of a pantheon of demonic gods, although none would know this, for to all non-hosts they were merely other hosts. Each of these hosts was splintered into 2 parts. The vast majority of them became their respective host, and the controlling portion of their identities was placed within one who would be an amalgamation, a blending of them all. Within the Hall of Lights, a new husk was created to hold their slivers as a combined whole should they be needed, should they wish to become as one. The mother of all was to be the identity of what would be to some as the mother of the demonic pantheon, the one who would sit above them, ensuring they obeyed the will of all. As long as it existed, they would be held in check, in addition to that of the checks and balances of the other lights, and would be guided by their combined wills. They would build their new host identities within Dominia, and gathered many to their sides, following their many facets, each with new host form being energized by the nature of their original powers as a demonic essence. The temples were set around the beacons that had devastated their land originally, each one linked to the beacon and using it as a tether to their new origins, their essence crystal. A central citadel was built and became the capital of Dominia, and within it lay their essence crystal, guarded and protected from sight and touch by many protections, wards, sigils, traps, as once had been recommended by Zorma before his great journey. Just in case, he had said, and naturally, Hurion gladly carried out such for his new lights. This new temple within their city became known as the Temple of Unification, for many reasons, partly due to their origins, and partly due to their goals, but others outside of this knowledge saw it as a beacon of light that all could draw to, and those following other hosts also gathered and set up representatives and petitioned for small temples to be erected, and to be part of this unification against the coming threat. It was a united stand, and this was more than they had ever hoped for. And so they began to build their forces, their own as well as their new allies, and prepared for the confrontation that would be held here all too soon, the first resistance against him. He had many pawns now, or rather mindless puppets, that reacted violently if discovered, but thankfully they rarely were, other than to those of the wild when they sought to root them out from their primes. This became something of an annoyance, but in time he was sure they would fall by the wayside. Whilst he built his own forces and toyed with the one prime he had chosen to represent himself as Arnash, his following had become strong, and was now pushing against the other religions, vying to control those undecided with regards to faith. The main benefit he had going for him was his conversion was absolute. There could be no doubt once they were his. How unfortunate for the others, he thought, allowing himself to feel contentment with his plans thus far. As he grew his power base further, it became apparent that some of those who were present that had ties to the magics from beyond the plaything prime were growing in power. They had seemingly allied themselves with a few of the other overlords in an attempt to gain favour, pacts, and other dark benefits, and he watched as they were controlled, twisted, or slain in their misguided grabs for power. Mortals, he sighed, laughing to himself inwardly. But then he saw something that caught his eye, and made him readdress his earlier thought. One of those humans, bristling with power from the deep planes themselves, seemed undetectable to his senses, except via direct observation. Clever little thing, he smiled. Hidden away and scurrying unseen through my domains. He watched them intently from a nearby pocket of magic, as he wondered just what this one was doing. Apparently it was gleaning magic from other daemons, overlords in fact, in direct combat, and walking away unscathed, with portions of their very essence. What are you up to, little man? He wondered, taking a closer look. This human stepped across the barriers between the deep plains as though it were merely a pathway from one side of a road to another, effortlessly. Even I cannot do this, he mused, and decided there and then that this one must be taken. Such abilities would serve him greatly. As he drew closer, the human seemed to notice his viewing efforts and turned to face him across the void, and waved with a flourish of arms. He had seen this one before, and it was not human. Such deceit! This was the one that had drawn him deep into the plains before, for none had that many limbs nor such ability to mask its identity. Oh, this time he would turn the tables on this creature, for it was in his playground now.